What's really significant about that is that we in that have the opportunity then to become partners in creation. If it didn't happen at one point, we too can be partners in that process. We do what is known as tikkun olam, really in a more traditional sense than the way the word is used today. Tikkun olam today has become a community service, and it's really far beyond that. It's the reparation of the world, and in that we participate with God. All right, so that's the first section. Then we come across liturgical poems known as piyutim that are alphabetical acrostics. On a weekday, there's a section, El, Baruch, Gadol, Deah. Each word, one at a time, is an alphabetical acrostic. On Shabbat, we have El, Baruch, El Adon al Kol HaMaasim, and I've highlighted for you here so you can see that where each of the letters is alphabetically. By the way, unlike the Shema, there's a nun. So that's why I don't buy the argument that the rabbis thought the nun was missing because it was because of some symbolic meaning. It really was a scribal error. In every other acrostic, there's a nun. Why was the ashrei different? I don't know. The other thing is, and I'll show you, there's a remnant a little bit later of another acrostic that only goes through the gimel that still remains in our service. So the question becomes, why acrostics again? One is they're mnemonics. I know as I'm going through Ashrei, for example, I can remember what's coming next because in my head I'm going A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I know what's going on. I'm remembering the letters in sequence, and I know what's happening. The same thing with El Adon, Baruch, God Lo, Da'at. The letters are in sequence, and it serves as a mnemonic. The rabbis also added the element that it expresses the way in which we relate to God with everything within us, with all our letters, with all our words, with all our thoughts, and all our feelings. So Maya, if you would go back down, back up to the beginning, to the story there. There's a simple man. Okay. And let's see. Rhoda, would you do us the honors of reading the simple man story?
Oh, just a second. Here it is. Reading 1. A simple man came to the synagogue once. During most of the service, he just sat and listened, for he did not know very much. He could not even read the Hebrew from the prayer book. All around him, the members of the congregation were standing in prayer, each man speaking with God in a whisper. And the simple man wished to speak with God too. He wished to tell God what a magnificent world he had made. He wished to thank the Lord for the blessings of health and life. But he could not find the right words to say. When he thought his heart would break from shame and sadness, he said, "Oh God, I cannot speak a beautiful prayer for you because I am a simple man. I have forgotten what I have studied. I am not good with words, but you, O Lord, you know how to do everything. So I will give you the Aleph Bet, and you can make a beautiful prayer for yourself." And then he recited Aleph Bet Gimel Dalet.
Many of you have probably heard a parallel story like this. This is not something new, but it really reflects, at its best, it's the kavanah. The words are important. The text is important, but the kavanah has an equal place in the process, what you're intending in. It's not just a ritualistic process of going through the recitation of words. The heart you bring to it matters. This piyut of El Adon, and if we could go back to that, Maya, that'd be great, the El Adon text, is attributed to the sages of the first century. However, it's more likely to be a product of the Middle Ages when most of the piyutim that we know were written. And so let's take a second and read through this. And I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to stop and ask people, what do you think is going on here, okay? So, creation reflects the rule of God, who is praised by the breath of all life. God's greatness and goodness fill the universe. Knowledge and wisdom encircle God's presence. Exalted is God by creatures celestial, enhanced and adorned by the mysteries of heaven. God's throne is guarded by truth and purity. God is surrounded by mercy and love. Good are the lights our God has created, fashioning them with insight and wisdom. Endowed by God with power and vigor, they maintain dominion amidst the world. Abounding in splendor, emanating brilliance, their radiant light adorns the universe, rejoicing and rising, gladly setting, they rush to obey their Creator's will. God is acclaimed by beauty and glory. God's sovereignty sung by celebration and song. God summoned the sun whose light shone forth, then gave to the moon its cyclical glow. The stars and planets, all bodies of the heavens, acclaim God with praise. Celestial creatures give glory and greatness. All right, so let's open up let's unmute for a second and give people, let's see if we can do this in some sort of turn taking, and go from there. What's going on here? If we can unmute.
Praise.
All right, say that again.
Praise
Praise.
and appreciation.
Okay. Anything else?
Specifically human.
Leslie, you see the concept of lights and the light of the universe being God's will, and the beauty and the sun and the moon. It's kind of setting the stage for praising God. And look what you have before you, and set the stage for prayer and praise. And then the stars, planets in the heavens.
I think, in a sense, all of God's greatness and all of his values and core assets are being transferred or translated for us.
Okay. Good. Great.
The word.
I'm praising God directly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, it's not so much praising God directly as what surrounds God.
Yeah, there's a sense of godliness here, that the sovavim, that the surroundings of God. Correct. Good. Rhoda?
Whenever we sing this, I always think of the word exaltation comes to mind.
Okay. Good.
I think.
Who's that?
I think these are the type of things that we as humans like to see in God. These are the things we want God to be.
Okay, so right. The reality of it is we don't know what God is, and that all prayer essentially conveys the message you just described.
Correct.
At best, it's human attribution. It's not. We don't have absolutes. You're right.
Correct.
Okay. So clearly what's going on here, among other things, the theme that everything praises God, everything in creation praises God, even celestial beings. All right. The heavenly hosts are praising God. And in a sense, what's being conveyed, again, if you remember, we started out with this blessing talking about the fact that it is a refutation of dualism, the Persian dualism, a God of light and a God of darkness. Here, it's extending that to the sun and the moon and the stars cannot be conceived of God. As it says here, they serve God. They fulfill God's desires. They too bow low before God and fulfill his will. So there's a refutation going on as well. So one, it's a declaration of God's glory as you've described in praises, but it's also a continuing of the theme of a refutation of multiple gods. All right. Again, where are we leading? We're leading up to Shema. So that theme makes sense in what we're doing here. All right. I also want to point out, I go down to verse 2, I'm looking for smechim. All right. I highlighted this letter in red. The reason being, the letter that should be there is a samech. Alphabetically, it's mem, nun, samech, ayin, pei. All right. That's what should be there. And it's not. It's a sin. And this is not uncommon in the ancient world. They didn't have Sidurim in front of them, and the substitution in an oral culture was very common and very comfortable. And so for me, it stuck out when I saw it the first time, but the reality of it is it's the same sound, and so they played off of that. I just wanted to note that it's out of sequence. All right? All right, let's go on. couple things within this text. If we can go up just a little bit, Maya, and go up. No, the other direction. There you go. Okay, I highlighted a couple things here. I want to note here that when they composed these piyutim, there are a lot of biblical references that are assumed to be understood. So, for example, you have the phrase, let's see, God's lights. You have good are the heavenly lights, and they maintain dominion. All right, I highlighted those phrases. The heavenly lights, it refers to the creation story. You have it there. Hama'or hagadol lememshelat hayom, v'hama'or hakatan lememshelat halayla. The big light, as it's described, to rule the day, and the small light, meaning the moon, to rule the night. And so the wording that's used here, they have moshlim, hama'or, ma'or, the or, it's not just or, it's ma'or. They're using the biblical words to reference back you to the creation story, which this is a blessing of creation. And so there's wording here that's meant to bring you back. Okay, let's go on. The next section. Let's go down to, a little bit further. And all right, Shabbat, all right, Kulam, that's fine for right now. In this blessing, it seems weird, but we find a second copy of Kedusha. Okay, you have Kadosh, 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 Baruch Kavod. All right, you have both of those phrases. There's a second recitation of Kedusha that's built into this blessing. And it is recited seated. We don't stand. It doesn't require a minyan, which is also contrary to the Kedusha as we normally know it. And what the rabbis did is they said this is because we are not, it's not Nikadesh. We are declaring God's greatness. It's now the angels. It's the angels who are declaring God's greatness. And what they did in a sense is built in a way that we could say Kedusha without saying Kedusha. That we can recite it through the lens of the angels when we can't say it. All right, so if you look here, in chorus, they reverently chant words of the living God, the eternal sovereign, adoring, beloved, and choice are they in all, fulfilling the Creator's will. And what is it they say? Kadosh, 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 Kadosh. Okay? Those are the words. They're saying the words of Kedusha. I also highlighted for you the Aleph Bet Gimel here. Apparently, at one point, there was an entire acrostic here, and it's gotten reduced. You still have ADC, or ABG, as the case may be. Okay? So you have the Kedusha here. So its pragmatic purpose is that we can say Kedusha in a sort of odd form. We also learn here, not only are the luminaries dependent upon God, but so are the angels. The heavenly hosts are also nothing more than servants of God. There is nothing in existence over which God is not in control, and is not in the domain of the divine. All right? Even the angels praise God. So then the question comes up, angels? What do you mean angels? What are we talking about here? I imagine if I asked you what an angel is, everyone would picture something with wings. We all have the television version of angels in our head. Okay? The Hebrew word for angel is malach. We sing Shalom Aleichem Malachei, the angels, all right? The servant angels. It comes from the word lishalach, to send, and it actually means a messenger. An angel is nothing more than someone who delivers a divine message, okay? Angels are not independent. There is no concept of a fallen angel like a Satan or a Satan that has an independent identity and can challenge God. Angels are created for a specific purpose, and they serve God. Now, in today's world, we rarely take this concept of angels very seriously, but that's fine, because there's a poetic imagination that's going on here of images that don't necessarily need to be taken literally. We speak of things all the time that are not factually true. The sun does not rise or set. And yet every one of us speaks of it. Breezes do not murmur or caress us. And yet we fully understand what is being said because the experience is as if that is the truth. And so angels, these messengers, are as if that's how it's brought down from heaven to us. And so the expression captures our imagination and in a sense becomes a myth, but not a myth in the sense of untrue, but a myth in a way of understanding the world. All right, let's go down a little further. All right, keep going. You see Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Keep going, Baruch Kavod. Okay, I'm gonna, all right, actually, no, stop there. Okay, before we switch into the second blessing, this first blessing we talked about is the creation, Yotzer, or Varech Koshet. God creates light and darkness and everything. It concludes the blessing, it's not here, I should have put it here, with a shift of tone. All right? Throughout the first blessing, we're speaking about God in transcendent ways. God creator. He creates the heavens. He creates the earth. He creates luminaries. He creates angels. He assigns every one of them a role to fulfill. God is in control. God is Malkeinu. God is our king. And suddenly, and unfortunately it's not here, but I'll tell you what it says in just a second. It says, Or Chadash al Tzion ta'ir v'nizkech ulanu mehera li'oro baruch atah Adonai yotzeram yoro. You have here a switch to God as in an imminent relationship. In a sense, it sort of introduces the next blessing, which is more about God's imminence. However, this juxtaposition of God's transcendence and immanence is so sharp here that Saadia Gaon in the 11th century chose not to include that line in his blessing, in his Siddur. All right, there's a shift that happens there. All right, so we've been talking all along that God transcended. Let's now start to talk about God in our world. A little history first. Ahava Rabbah, Ahavtanu. We sing this. At night we sing Ahavat Olam. It's a parallel blessing. Originally, this was not here. What was here instead, prior to the Shema, was the Ten Commandments. So who has the audacity to remove the Ten Commandments from the service? It sounds rather odd if you think about it. All right? Why it was taken and removed is that heretics began to suggest that the only thing given at Sinai, and therefore all that needed to be followed, was the Ten Commandments. You can hear Christianity here. All right? It's not Torah that was given at Sinai, it's the Ten Commandments. And to make clear that that is not a Jewish perspective, that is not the Jewish understanding, the rabbis removed the reading of the Ten Commandments from the liturgy, and they replaced it with the text of Ahava Rabbah, which speaks of God's love being fulfilled by giving of Torah. Okay? It doesn't mean, there's no Aseret HaDibrot, there's no mention of Ten Commandments here. It's Torah u'mitzvot, Torah and all its commandments. All right? So, Peggy, would you do us the honor of reading us the top paragraph here? Deep as your, in the English.
In the English, deep is your love for us, Adonai our God, boundless your tender compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, you taught our ancestors life-giving laws. They trusted in you. For their sake, graciously teach us. Our Maker, merciful provider, show us mercy, grant us discernment and understanding. Then we will study your Torah, heed its words, teach its precepts, and follow its instruction, lovingly fulfilling all its teachings. Were you testing if I was listening?
What's that?
Were you testing to see if I was listening?
No, I apologize. And Ilana, if you would go down to the next two English readings there, the rest of the paragraph here. And Ilana, if you would read that for us. Open our eyes.
The four corners of the earth and lead us in
No. Wait.
Oh.
Go up to open our eyes to your Torah.
Where is that?
Right, it's the ha'eri nenu b'torah tech. It's right above.
Yeah, okay. Open our eyes to your Torah. Help our hearts cleave to your mitzvot. Unite all our thoughts to love and revere you. Then we're never brought to shame, for we trust in your awesome holiness and will delight in your deliverance.
All right, go to the last one down at the bottom. Keep going with bring us safely.
Bring us safety from the four corners of earth and lead us in dignity to our holy land. For you are the source of deliverance. You have called us from all people and tongues, constantly drawing us nearer to you, that we lovingly offer you praise, proclaiming your oneness. Praised are you, Adonai, who loves the people of Israel.
Okay, I first want to begin by pointing out again, this is what's known as an open blessing. The first couple words are not Baruch Atah. It only ends with a blessing. There's no opening piece to it. It starts Ahava Rabbah. There's no Baruch Atah. So that's again the definition of an open versus a closed blessing. The second blessing is obviously much shorter, number one. It praises God's love. We have this word love throughout, which God expresses to Israel, but it's not love in the sense that we think of. We like to think of it, this is a prayer about love, but it's love in the sense that God has expressed love through the giving of Torah and the laws of Torah, all right? The text expresses our hope that God may enlighten our eyes and our minds to understand his teachings, that we should love God and his laws. And obviously the frequency of a particular word will highlight the major thing, that it is love. I mean, you see this word read 6 times. Ahava shows up 6 times in this paragraph. And I highlighted it in red so you could see it. Reuben Hammer makes the note that 3 times it's the Ahava is in reference to God's love for us. And 3 times it's our love of God. So there's a parallel relationship that's going on here. But what is different is love here, as it's understood, is expressed in giving of law. Okay? That seems somewhat counterintuitive to the American mindset. However, I might suggest to you that parents, all right, the analogy of children who grow up in a home without rules, those children report experiencing not love, but apathy. It is through structure that oftentimes love is communicated. And so I want to make that general sense, because when we talk about this paragraph, and there's a tendency to feel the light-hearted love that we feel and we think of in romance. It's far more connected to the love of a parent. There is a hierarchy in this love. It is not equality. All right. God's love is the first and the final subject of the blessing. It ends with Habocher b'Amo Yisrael. God loves us. And the sentence Shema, which will follow in just a second, all right, is enclosed, all right, between God's love for Israel, Ahava Rabbah, which we're reading here, and then V'ahavta, and we will love God. So Shema, this relationship of understanding of God as one and we are in relationship with God, is surrounded by 2 paragraphs that speak of God's love to us and our love to God. Okay? Now, I've also highlighted a number of things. Maya, go back up to the beginning where it says, I think I highlighted Avinu Malkeinu. It's good that you know, back up. Yeah. It's good that you know Hebrew. All right. Avinu Malkeinu. We all know this phrase because we sing it over and over and over for the high holidays. God is both a parent and God is a monarch. All right. In Yotzer, in the first blessing, we relate to the all-powerful God who rules mankind and is a sovereign. In this blessing, we still recognize God as sovereign, but we also, as I just said, see him as a caring parent. And that's where this shift happens, and when we go from transcendence to immanence. And as I said, the love is expressed through Torah, umitzvot, God, Torah, commandments, and law. All right, go back down a little bit forward. I'm looking for V'dabek Libenu. There we go. Next concept expressed in this section. Okay. We all sing V'ha. There we go. Okay. May our hearts cleave to your mitzvot. Okay. In Chassidut, among the Chassidim, the word dabek means much more than simply cleaving or remaining close to God. It's more than just a relationship. It comes from the same root letter of the word dveikut, daled bet kuf, which is arguably the goal of the fulfillment of all Hasidic spirituality. All right, dveikut is the core of Hasidism. It is nothing less than a goal of fusion with God, a loss of self in the enveloping waters of God. The goal of prayer, and you hear me say this a lot, is not to find ourselves. That is not what prayer is about. It is not to identify what's within us. Through prayer, the goal is to lose our consciousness of where we begin and where we end and God begins, to lose the barrier between us, to temporarily fuse with all that is God. What makes this different from meditation is that meditation is not necessarily directed to God and to the relationship with God. This is specifically about relationship with God. A medieval rabbi presented the following analogy. Each raindrop as it falls from the sky has its own distinct composition, its own identity. However, as it falls into the sea, those boundaries are lost and it becomes one with the sea. That is the goal of Dveikut. It's not easily achieved. But again, I want to point out the goal of prayer is not to bring your problems and it's not to bring yourself and self-searching. It is far more, it's a much higher, a much more powerful message and something that's simplistic. It is literally the goal is to lose oneself, to lose one's cares, to lose one's self-identity in this process and to find yourself in God's world and making a difference in God's world outside of ourselves. It's to externalize ourselves, not to internalize ourselves. All right, then we come to the next line. And after this, I'll take comments and questions on Avinu Malkeinu, V'dabek Libenu, V'havienu. This last one, V'havienu l'shalom, gather us in peace from the four corners of the earth. This is so that we, and why? So that we can, if we're all gathered in Israel theoretically, Israel is the place where mitzvot can both most easily be fulfilled and most meaningfully be fulfilled. It is God's land. Okay? Now, we're all sitting here, so I'm not criticizing anybody for not moving to Israel because I haven't done so either. I get it. All right? But Israel, in concept, in biblical thought, is the place where mitzvot can most easily be fulfilled. It is the place that at the end of days we will all return. And this is a hint at those final days. Bring us together from the four corners of the earth. And this is acted out, all right, when we sing these words. The tradition from the Middle Ages is to gather our fringes from the four corners of the talit, all right, and to hold them in our hand as we say Shema. The last thing I want to talk about in this paragraph. So far we've had Avinu Malkeinu, God is sovereign and King, immanence and yes, God is ruler. We have Dabek, we have God trying to merge with God. We have gathering from the four corners of the earth, the ultimate time of return to Israel. The last one is problematic. You have here, you see this throughout the prayer book, Vacharta. The bottom line, Habocher, it's the same root. It's the same word, chosen. All right? Who has chosen us, Uvanu Vacharta Mikol Am V'Lashon. Am and Lashon is the people and languages. It's the same term. It's a synonym. Who has chosen us from amongst all the nations. Okay? And in the end, Habocher Be'amo Yisrael Be'ahava. who has chosen the people of Israel with love. This idea appears and reappears throughout the Siddur. And obviously in recent years, in the last 200 years for sure, it has been a source of controversy. Some have rejected it because it's been used as an excuse for anti-Semitic action. See, the Jews are haughty. They're chauvinistic. They think they're superior. Okay? And the real message is different than that. It's real that we're different. I'll talk about that in a second. All right? We don't want to present ourselves as haughty or superior. We want to affirm one can be proud of oneself. One can talk about oneself as being an American and be proud of that without saying we feel awesome without saying the rest of the world is any less. Okay? The words chosen people do not appear anywhere in the Bible. It is not a biblical phrase. Rather, the Torah speaks of us as an Am Segula, a treasured nation in the following context. All right, Peter, would you read? It says, and Moses went up. It should be further down, Maya. Yeah.
And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell to the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I carried you on the wings of eagles and brought you to me. And now, if you listen to my voice and keep my commandments, you will be for me a treasured people among all people, for all the earth is mine. And you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you must speak to the children of Israel."
Okay. The message is here, the Jews have the opportunity to become a treasured nation. We are not an Am Segula. We are not chosen by being born Jews, but by living in a particular way that God has chosen for us. We can opt in to being chosen. Okay? All right, reading number 3. This is from Heschel. Gail, would you read that for us? Okay. I saw Gail. Ah. Are you there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here, but okay,
Okay.
now I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I couldn't find how to unmute myself.
We got it.
We have not chosen God, He has chosen us. We do not say that we are superior people. The chosen people means a people approached and chosen by God. The significance of this term is genuine in relation to God rather than in relation to other people. It signifies not a quality inherent in the people, but a relationship between the people and God.
Okay. Heschel teaches the notion that a chosen people is not a description, but a command. It is a command that we must live our lives as partners in a relationship with God. And it's important that it is a command, it is not descriptive. And by the way, nothing in this concept suggests that other peoples cannot have their own special relationship with God as well. Just because we have a relationship with God doesn't mean that others don't. Okay, it can be distinct and different from ours. I take that very seriously. I believe that we are chosen. And I think others have had other moments of revelation with God in their own ways. If anything, I think we're less chauvinistic than a Christianity, which would say to you, if you don't accept this, you don't get into heaven. That's far more chauvinistic in concept. All right? We do not believe that. If anything, we believe that it's easier for non-Jews to get into heaven than for Jews. They have 7 commands to follow. We have 613. The challenge for us is greater. So it is a command to opt in, to live a given way. I think things popping up on my iPad here. Okay. And the other thing to note about this whole concept of love here, it is a repudiation of the Christian assertions early in the 1st and 2nd century that Judaism is a dry, legalistic burden to its adherents. No matter how much suffering Israel has experienced at the hands of oppressors, Israel always turned around and said, Ahava Rabbah Ahavtanu, you love us. Okay, you have loved us. All right. And the concluding blessing ends with that theme again, who has chosen his people Israel in love. Okay. This paragraph about Torah makes sense because we're about to enter the Shema, which is all about, is 3 paragraphs right out of the Torah. And so it conceptually makes sense as well. Now I'm going to stop and ask to unmute. And we'll take comments on Ahava Rabbah. We went through 4 different concepts here. We went through Avinu Malkeinu. We went through Dabek Libenu. We went through chosenness. And we went through bringing us to the 4 corners of the earth. Those are the 4 concepts that are basically within this one paragraph. Thoughts on anything you heard?
Well, isn't the Bekli Benu relates to why we fast on Yom Kippur?
Tell me what you mean. I've not heard that. Tell me what you mean.
Well, I mean that you're supposed to not think about yourself. You dvekut with God. And that's why eating is interfering with, with dvekut with God.
Okay, so
It's
on
an
Yom Kippur,
external thing.
fair enough. So on Yom Kippur, we take it one step further in the attempt to reach that sense of merging. We take it a step further by removing all earthly kinds of needs. Yeah,
And
but
that's
it's still
the Bek. And that's
right.
the dvekut, the Bekli Benu, right?
Right, but it's also true throughout the year. It's just in Yom Kippur, it's in a sense easier because we take away all the impediments. Right.
Looking at mass, I need to look at mass.
I hear somebody, but I don't hear what you're saying.
Okay, hold on. Let me make sure I'm muted.
Okay. Anybody else? Any comments?
Yeah. Where is it that God offered the Torah to all the other nations? So, in a sense, they could have chosen.
So that's a midrash. That's not in the Torah. That is a midrash that, in a sense, the rabbis tried to explain why Israel. And so, they developed a mythology around that created, it was offered to all the other nations, and ultimately everybody said, no, I don't like this law, I don't like that law, I like adultery, I like murder, I like whatever it is, okay? You're not going to get rid of it. And then Midrash then says, okay, Israel chose it, but it also describes God as holding a mountain over their heads and saying, would you like the Torah? All right? So I don't happen to like that mitzvah because of that Midrash, because it implies that we really didn't have much choice.
Right.
But that is a Midrash. It's not Torah. Anybody else?
Oh, unmute. Okay, it's Rona. So I got this visual image of, and I don't know how I would actually produce that, but a person being surrounded, circling inside, the person inside the surrounded colors, emphasis, whatever you would do to emphasize that you were surrounded by, merged into God from this. I don't know. It just popped into my head.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fine. It is, there is no absolute visual. We bring to it our own metaphors and our own understanding.
It just hits me. Sometimes things pop to that. I can't always then take them into actual artwork, but it just popped in that way.
Yeah. I happen to really like the medieval rabbi's description of the raindrop.
Okay.
Because boundaries between, in a sense, boundaries between people. There are those who would say to you that those boundaries are artificial too, that we're all connected and through some energy level. And I must tell you that I like to go and eat in restaurants, even if I'm sitting and eating a book, even if sometimes I consume the book, right? That even if I'm reading a book, I like the energy of people around me. What I feel in the sense of loss right now, I can have these conversations with you here on Zoom, and there's a value to that. But it is not nearly as powerful as sitting across the table and feeling the energy of other people. There are those boundaries when we approach one another can be artificial, all the more so with God. That's the goal. Whether or not any of us ever achieves that they could, obviously, you know, I think that the Hasidim would tell you their Rebbe achieves it, and therefore he's able to emanate it to them through himself. And that's why they would all go to the Rebbe. They wanted that experience of being able to have it translated for them, all right? Whether or not we actually experience it, that is the goal. It's very powerful. For people who say to me, again, the prayer book does not speak to them, it doesn't, I don't get it. And I don't understand it, and I feel sorry. Because I walk out of there moved. And not by the music. The music is a secondary piece of it. The music, too, is powerful. And I'm saying that as a chazan. The music, too, is powerful. But the words and the message must always be the preeminent part of this. Right? The music has to reflect the words. Anybody else? Okay.
Am I on? Cantor Levine.
Is that Fred?
I find these prayers beautiful, but they're very personal. When I pray, particularly on the High Holy Days, I don't just pray for myself. I pray for my family. I pray for my wife. I pray for my children. I pray for all Jews. And I find these prayers extremely, as you went through them, just for myself.
Why?
Well, the words. It's open for me.
Where? Wait.
I do not see anything for Jews in general, but I do not see anything that we've gone through for my family. For my fellow congregants.
So
for you.
But Fred, the whole thing is in the plural. Ava Rabba Avtanu, you have loved us. It's not you loved us.
Yes.
May our hearts cleave. Okay? Avinu Malkenu is not my father, my king. It's our father, our king. The whole thing is that I've made it more personal. You're right. I stand corrected if I've misled, because I think in a sense it's easier to understand it on a personal level. But the prayers themselves are in the collective.
Okay.
Okay. There's every time you see the nu at the end of a word, nun vav no nu, you don't see ni and nun yud. You see nu throughout. That is the plural. It's
well,
our,
Hebrew grammar is very difficult. Okay.
If you think Hebrew is difficult, try English.
You know, the feeling that one gets in a congregation or a minyan is one of a communal cohesion. But in a sense, that congregation eventually is elevated to more of a God to personal relationship as well.
Right. It's individuals coming together to engage with God and to break down boundaries, but coming together to do it. All right. One can pray on one's own. You can pray at home, and I remember my great grandfather standing there with tefillin at 7 o'clock in the morning before he went to work. I remember that very clearly. All right. But there's special merit to doing it, even though you're saying the same words, to doing it in the presence of a community. Because at the end of the day, God's presence is more easily felt within a community. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I'm not changing, but it's helpful.
No. I am addressing this to each individual because I think the message of it's all about us is a good message. But it's hard to hear us. What do I do? What do I do with this?
That's true.
I still need to know what to do with this. Okay, and so even though it's in the plural, you're right. I've been talking in the singular, so that is fair. All right. How do we merge with God? Okay. All right. If we can go back to the text, Maya, and get to Shema. And I'm just going to start this with the top line today. We won't even get through the top line. Am I missing? There we go. Okay, I missed it. Okay. So, Shema, hear, listen, pay attention, Yisrael. Israel could be the sons of Jacob. All right? It could be the entire people. Adonai is a name. Okay? It's often translated as Lord. And you'll see in all our translations, we've just used the word Adonai because it's a name. It's like George or Fred or Joyce, okay? It's a name. Adonai is our God. Adonai one. Adonai alone, okay? This next text is not a prayer in the ordinary sense. When the kids say Shema is the most important prayer, I bristle. It's a Torah text. Okay, this in a sense is the dialogue of the service. We are going to speak to God in the Amidah. Here, God speaks to us. We're reading God's words is the intent of the rabbi. Okay, when we say Shema, oftentimes we're referring to this one line. I just also want to point out, oftentimes it also is a reference to the entire 3 paragraphs. It can be both. Matter of fact, most of the time we're referring to all 3 paragraphs. What is significant here? Most love stories, we've surrounded this with God loves us, and we're about to do V'ahavta, and you shall love God. Most love stories begin with a wedding scene in which the partners stand together and express their devotion and their commitment to one another. In Jewish life, that commitment between God and Israel is not made through a traditional vow, but through the recitation of Shema. This is our wedding vow. Leslie, you've been in the bar mitzvah workshops, and I talked to the kids about the fact that the tefillin are wedding rings, and the Shema is the wedding vow. They run hand in hand. For the rabbis, this was what we're going to read after this first line, in a sense, are the terms of the relationship with God. It is like a ketubah. You've got a relationship here. What I say here is it's not just God is one, God is the one. Meaning, like you stand under a chuppah with a spouse and say, you are now the one. You are the one to whom I will commit all of my attention, all my energies. You are my primary commitment in the world. So it is with God. There can be no alternatives. You cannot, when we say don't commit adultery, it's also talking about idolatry. All right? It's important. The rabbis defined the relationship with God as an intense, monogamous relationship of one soul with one God, which encompasses all of our experiences, good and bad, and is expressed on our part through Torah mitzvot and Torah study. So, the ancient people believed in many gods, as you know. Just think back to the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Parthians. You can go back as far as you want. Every TV show, you get the message. Because each people had their own god and their own land. They considered themselves separate and unrelated to the surrounding people. Anything goes because they're not like us. Judaism introduces the idea of one God, creator of everything. Since God is the creator of all people, that means essentially we're all brothers and sisters, one large family. It has a very different message in that unity. Now, I need to point out historically that at the same time monotheism is who we are, it also, along with it, like everything else, comes a consequence. If I believe that many people have many gods, I don't have to beat them up to prove that my God is and their God I can accept their God as well. I can have many. Once you introduce monotheism, my God has to be the God and your God has to be wrong. All right? And it served as a source of war. So just like the idea that if God is the creator of everything, we have to struggle with the issue of evil, we too also have to deal with if God is one and there's no parallels, it has led to historical wars as a result. It comes with consequences. We perceive of God in many ways. He's kind, God is angry, God is merciful, God is wise, God is judgmental. We know this from the high holidays. And medieval philosophers, the result of that is they came to the conclusion that there must be many gods. And here the Torah is saying, no, that's not the case. God's many manifestations are one. It's the same as we, as people, bring ourselves to different people within ourselves to different situations. I remember reading in one of my psychology classes years ago about the teacher who would stand in front of his class and speak and be proper in English and was just a proper role model. And over the summer, he would get a job as a longshoreman and used every four-letter word he'd ever heard because that's what was going on around him. We differ based on the situation in which we find ourselves. Doesn't mean we're different people. We bring different qualities. And so that was the understanding of God in the many different descriptions of his qualities. The importance of this verse, by the way, is evidenced by the fact that it shows up throughout the service. In the early morning, in the preliminary service, we say Shema. As part of the Musaf Kedusha, we say Shema. When the Torah is taken out from the ark, we say Shema. On Yom Kippur, when we end the day, we say Shema. It's part of our bedtime prayers. It's part of our deathbed confessional. Can there be anything questionable about the fact that this line is core to our lives? This sense of relationship and identity is core for us. I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I will continue on with a little bit there next week, and then we'll go into the rest of the text. I want to point out one other thing. I apologize. Go back to the text, if we could, the Shema text there up on the page. All right. You'll notice I put two letters in red. If you look in the Torah, those two letters are large, as they are here. I made them large. They're not in red in the Torah, but they are large. Okay? So, of course, the rabbis have to come up with, okay, what's going on here? There's a number of different ways in which they understood it, and you can see them playing. All right, so the first one, let's take the ayin. The ayin is large because this is rabbinic, this is midrash at its best. The letter that sounds like an ayin is an aleph. If this were an aleph, the word would not be shema, but shema, which means perhaps. If that were the case, this verse would say, perhaps Israel Adonai is our God and Adonai alone. That's not much of a faith statement. Okay? So that we must emphasize the ayin, not an aleph. The daled at the end, echad, the daled looks an awful lot like a resh. If this were a resh, again, there are no vowels in the Torah, the word would be acher, which means another. And what you would have is, here, O Israel, Adonai our God, Adonai is another. Another implies by definition more than one. So we need to, in every way possible, reject that concept. And when you hear people say Shema, you'll hear them emphasize, not just visually, but verbally, you'll hear echad. Okay? As a way of making it clear what's being said. Again, this is rabbinic midrash. You see an opportunity to teach a lesson. The third lesson they pull from it is that the ayin and the daled together form the word aid, witness. And that what we're doing here is witnessing God's oneness in the world. So you can see how they played with it. Is that why it's a large ayin and a large daled? Who knows? Is there an opportunity to pull a lesson from it for our lives? You bet. And that's what the rabbis did. All right, we can unmute. And anybody who has questions, I'll take. Sandy or Leslie, is that your hand? I see a question. Yeah.
Not so much a question as a learning that I had learned from Rabbi Judy Abrams, of blessed memory, the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso. She taught us that when Moses went up to get the 10 Commandments, that was the blessing that the angels said on God. And then when he came down, when Moses came down, he said, this is the blessing that the angel said, but we can't say it out loud. So you just have to say it to yourself. But on Yom Kippur, because we need as many blessings as we can receive, we're permitted to say it out loud on Yom Kippur.
Okay, so that is a lovely midrash. And next week, when we get to the line, I'm going to give you a more pragmatic understanding of it. Doesn't mean it's more correct. It's just a more pragmatic understanding of why we say it silently and out loud on Yom Kippur. But that's what the rabbis did. They saw the opportunity to build a lesson for life out of something that seems out of the ordinary. Okay.
And I liked also when we were saying the preceding blessings to get ready to say the Shema, that we gather the four corners of our talis, the tzitzit, on the line, bring us back from the four corners of the earth. I learned that in junior congregation when my children were little.
Me too. Me too. Anybody else?
Yes, I had a question about, I went to my friend's temple, and she's Reformed, but they say the second line aloud.
Right.
And I always wondered why as conservatives we don't, which I heard the story that Susie just said, but then they say it aloud when they go to services on Friday night or Saturday.
All right, since we didn't get to that line and I want to deal with it next time, I'm going to ask you to write the question down.
Okay.
I want to deal with it as we get to that second line, not sort of preempt that conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
Cantor, I actually remember saying that line, and I don't know, I grew up in Tiferet, Israel in Dallas, so I can't imagine why we were saying it.
I know when I was at Tiferet, when Yitzchak Cohen was there, they weren't saying it.
Well, later, yeah, and maybe I'm mixing up because I also used to go with my friend to temple, so, but
Yeah.
somehow I remember saying it. But I really liked I'd heard the witness explanation before for the two letters, and that really rings with me. It makes a lot of sense that they would try to explain it that way.
Great.
What you're doing.
Cool. Good. Anybody else? All right. Shabbat shalom. I hope that your prayers will be meaningful. All right. I hope every one of us will achieve the Veikut this weekend. Okay. That's the goal.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.